My name is Aibek Ashirov, and I'm an economist in the World Bank's Poverty and Equity Global Practice based in Bishkek office. I joined the bank in 2021. Previously, I worked in the National Bank for 13 years, where I was the head of Monetary Operation Department. I'm holding an MPA degree from the Columbia University. And now let me introduce my colleagues. The first presenter is Ms. Gohar Gyulumyan. She's a senior economist at the World Bank Macroeconomic Trade and Investment Global Practice. She has more than 23 years of work experience in the Europe and Central Asia region, including Armenia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and the Kyrgyz Republic, where she led budget support operations and analytic and advisory projects, as well as managed technical assistance programs to support implementation of structural reforms. She holds a master's degree in international development policy from Duke University and Masters of Arts with honors from Yerevan State University. And from the left is Dr. Chiyu. He is an economist at the World Bank. He is based in Washington, D.C. He leads the e-Gate project, Elevate Global Access Through E-Commerce program in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan, as well as World Bank flagship analytical works such as systematic country diagnostic in Tajikistan and poverty assessment in Uzbekistan. His academic publication focus on poverty dynamics and technology, climatic and demographic risks. He has a PhD in economics from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So once again, welcome to our session, and I'm giving floor to Ms. Gohar.
Thank you, Aibek. It is my pleasure to be here to this very important conference and present findings of our recent diagnostic work. Before starting my presentation, I would like to say a few words about this core diagnostics, which we call systematic country diagnostic. It is conducted once in 5 years in all our countries, in countries where the bank is active, and it informs the World Bank's partnership strategy or partnership framework with its client countries. We either conduct full systematic diagnostic, or we update if we find that findings and recommendations of the full diagnostic remain relevant. The first full diagnostic report was conducted in Kyrgyzstan in 2017 and published in 2018. Last year, we found that it's the main diagnostics remained relevant, and we conducted just an update. And it informed the country partnership framework of the World Bank, which will be discussed at the board on 31st of October, later this month. Just to focus your attention, what is the main question that we are pursuing while conducting this diagnostic? It is basically the assessment of country's performance in achieving its the twin goals. What we call twin goals is the poverty reduction and achieving shared prosperity. And everything that either supports these twin goals or impose barriers to achieve the poverty reduction and shared prosperity. In understanding these drivers of the achieving twin goals or barriers to achieve these goals, we are doing full diagnostic of the growth performance, of the governance context, of other constraints like climate vulnerability, enabling environment like business environment, like investment climate, like human capital challenges, and so on. So my presentation today will be to give some to set a context of the Kyrgyz economy's growth and poverty performance over the last 2 decades, then highlight, present some of the main challenges in key areas like business environment, public service delivery, human capital development, and environmental and climate challenge. And then I will summarize the key findings, main outcomes of our diagnostics, and the suggested development pathways that draws from that diagnostics. And if the time permits, I will also reflect on some high-level outcomes that we believe these pathways will lead to. So let's take a view of the past 2 decades. When we are looking at growth and poverty trajectory over the past 2 decades, we see that the Kyrgyz economy demonstrated or performed at generated robust growth for the last 2 decades, although it was volatile and often exposed to external and internal shocks, but on average, the economy grew by 4%. And it allowed to grow from low income to lower middle income over these 2 decades. And the main drivers of growth, though, were concentrated in 2 factors. This is gold extraction and export and remittances. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here, in addition to volatility and exposure to shock, is that you see that the composition, the structure of the economy has also evolved, which is a positive sign, from predominantly agriculture dominated to now more service economy. Services now account for more than 50% of total GDP. And this shift also, this structural shift was accompanied with also shift in employment structure. Yes, you see in the second. But unfortunately, this sectoral or structural shift in the economy has not been translated into the commensurate shift in the export basket. It still remains dominated by metals and gold. The other export items, although we see some dynamic in recent years, still is small. Which means that, suggests that growth of the Kyrgyz economy was mostly driven by non-tradables. Yes. But if we summarize these 2 decades of economic performance, we can say that it helped, with all its shortcomings and weaknesses, this growth sustained over the 2 decades helped to reduce poverty from over 60% at the beginning of century to close to 20% before the pandemic. But this good news comes with also some risks and some observed vulnerabilities. When we zoom in into the poverty reduction outcomes, we see that even before the pandemic, the poverty reduction pace has been declining. And what we call shared prosperity indicators, when we look at the growth of income for bottom 40% of population, we see that after 2015, the growth for this segment of population, incomes for this segment of population has declined. And compared to the previous period, it is significant reduction. And also in economic performance, we see that over time, the growth performance also has weakened. And not only Kyrgyzstan's performance over time, but its performance in the context of regional economies. And the vulnerabilities I was talking about led to sharp contraction when the COVID pandemic hit. And we also see in the post-pandemic period, while other economies were managed to basically restore the pre-pandemic level in the first year after pandemic, the Kyrgyz economy did it the second year. So it was not easy. And as we see, yes, the poverty reduction was significant, but still about 65–70% of population is in vulnerable status, or is only one shock away from falling into poverty. You see that after even 2019, this curve, the dynamic of vulnerability has increased. First, probably I should have said that our diagnostic is based, looks until 21 as actual data, because this was the work was done mostly in 2022. Therefore, the results of the most recent results are not reflected here. But I would say that the picture is not different if we add the 2022. Now, after having this general picture and for the sake of presenting main findings in the limited time frame, I will now move to zooming in the sectors that I said, what's going on in the business environment, in other major segments of economy. I will try to, in the report, we try to see what are root causes of having persistent vulnerability in social, having weak, having also relatively weak economic performance. The 4% annual growth, if we put in the context of 2% growth of population, and also some 4–5% depreciation of currency annually, probably is not a high growth rate. So in order to basically achieve better results and stronger poverty reduction outcomes, we looked at the business environment to see why the private sector is not able to generate more higher growth. Surveys show that the top 4 reasons for weak business performance, they relate basically to public sector. Not surprisingly, because the enabling environment for better competition, for creating jobs, for investing, it relates to policy certainty, or as businesses, they responded to policy instability, instability in governance institutions, and so on. When we look at different surveys, the corruption perception has also deteriorated. The last survey shows that the country was pushed back to its level in 2012. And other indicators also are not speaking about significant improvement in the business environment. So in addition to this policy-related issue, areas where basically requires more investment by private and public sector related to trade facilitation, logistics, creating connectivity, so on and so forth. And here also we see that the countries' geographic landlockedness and other constraints are they have further deepened by a lack of investment in improving the logistic performance. The next area where the next segment which we want to, I'd like to draw your attention is the weak governance which undermines public service delivery. Here I have presented this standard World Bank worldwide governance indicators where you see that except for the regulatory quality in all dimensions, in all other dimensions, the Kyrgyz performance is weak, especially when it relates to rule of law and corruption. Probably you know that the Kyrgyz public sector is large. When we look at the, for example, budget spending on wages and salaries, it is now reaching to about 14–15% of GDP, which crowds out other spending from the government to support basic public services. On the one hand, this yes, it crowd out other useful public spending. On the other hand, it creates bureaucratic burden on businesses. And here I have presented numbers from surveys, which shows the level of the access of water, sanitation, and central gas supply. Still, only 35% of population has access to these basic utilities. But to be fair, when we look at 10 years ago, these indicators were probably half of the levels presented. So now let's look at the situation, look at the human capital segment. Here, I think we should state that the Kyrgyz Republic inherited a relatively good, strong human capital. But unfortunately, years of underinvestment in the sector led to outcomes such as 65% as of now, 65% of 15 years old children, they are lacking the basic level of skills in mathematics. This is survey-based data. And later today, my colleague will show outcomes of listening to Kyrgyzstan, where parents are also, 70% of parents are not satisfied with the learning conditions they have for their children. So these outcomes are consistent. The COVID pandemic basically led to interruption of learning process, and this put lasting scars to the human capital of the country. But in general, when we put Kyrgyzstan's human capital indicators in the context of lower middle income countries and compare it with the broader Europe and Central Asia regional average, we see that except for one or two indicators, the country is still performing well. I think the main challenge here would be to address the consequences of a pandemic. Now let's look at the climate context and the limitations that it is posing to the economy. My colleagues at the bank, they have projected that the temperature increase in Kyrgyzstan for the next few decades, it will be higher than it will be more than the global average projected for other countries. And this will lead to very serious challenges for agriculture sector, for human productivity in general, and also will necessitate serious investment into adaptation and also addressing other challenges. So this is a constraint that should be internalized, addressed in order to then ensure higher development goals, and in order to address the twin goals that I have set of poverty reduction and shared prosperity. To summarize our finding of our diagnostics, we see that the growth model that the country has adapted, it is falling, and we see it in the falling growth performance. I haven't shown, but basically it is more evident when we are looking at the trajectory of per capita GDP growth. We see that the public service efficiency is low, and delivering core public goods and services is also lagging. There is inadequate policy and institutional framework for stable and conducive, for creating conducive environment for private sector development and growth. And this limitation leads to limited progress in creating jobs, in delivering basic services, and this leads to disparities in the economy. And the vulnerability to climate change leads to depletion of its natural resource base, and requires more resources to address these challenges. In this context, probably it is natural that we have come to this idea, having 4 pathways for the country's future development in order to move from vulnerability to resilience. The authorities, we suggest that they catalyze private sector-led growth. They promote inclusion by investing more in human capital. They focus on building effective state with dominance of law, the rule of law, high governance standards, and also focusing on risk, strengthening risk management capacities. And also the management of strengthening the natural resource efficiency, basically to build a climate resilient economy. Putting all of this, basically under these 4 pathways, we suggested the government 10 policy priorities. For each pathway, we suggested different, many policy areas where the government can improve the performance, but in the end, 10 priorities which fall under 4 pathways. I already mentioned the 4 pathways, but for each, we also have suggested priorities. For example, to promote private sector led growth and job creation. Basically, at this stage of development, we think that reducing administrative cost of compliance and improving access to finance are the priority policies. And similarly for other pathways, basically strengthening the health services and improving safe water and other core public services would be priority. In the end, what is the objective, as was mentioned during the opening session? The objective is to achieve high level of welfare for population, to have more jobs, formal jobs, and better paid jobs, to be able to reduce vulnerabilities, health risks, to have improved access to basic primary social and other services, utilities, and also to be able to cope with climate changes in rural and urban areas. Our report is publicly available. You can access it in both languages, English and Russian, by these provided addresses. I will be happy to receive your feedback. This is my email address. And this, just to say that this was a collective work by teamwork by other groups and colleagues that work in poverty, in governance, and other sector, other areas. So please share your views and feedback on our work. Thank you. I'll be happy.
Thank you, Gohar. It was a great macro outlook, and this analytical work actually was the fundamental of our new CPF program, Country Partnership Framework Program, that will start this year, and it will last for 5 years until 2028. So these findings basically was the foundation of our country partnership agreement with our government. Thank you. So I think now from macro outlook, we are going to micro outlook, and we'll see what ordinary people thinks. Starting from 2021, we are conducting the survey listening to the Kyrgyz Republic, and actually some was mistakenly thought that we are organizer of this conference because it's like kind of life in Kyrgyzstan and listening to the Kyrgyz Republic is quite similar, but no, this is a survey, monthly panels survey that we are conducting under Effective Governance Economic Development Program financed by FCDO. So what is the listening to the Kyrgyz Republic survey? So basically, this survey provides high frequency data on social and economic well-being. So we are collecting data each month, and now I will show the data for September round. If it's like today is beginning of October and we already have data. So we can see the impact of reforms or crisis with every short lag. Interviews of a representative sample of respondents from all regions of the country, rural and urban areas, and similar initiatives in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. We also started to implement this survey in Ukraine, in Caucasus countries like Armenia and Georgia. So you can compare the data from the region and from Caucasus. It's not just a survey for a survey, and how we are using that. So first of all, our survey informs policy decision. We are closely working with the central bank on inflation expectations, and we embedded questions on expectations from households into our survey. So, and we are sharing the data with the National Bank, and they are using this data in their inflation expectations modeling. We also embedded questions on e-commerce volume for the National Statistical Committee. So starting from October round, we are getting the data from the household, how many e-commerce transactions they are doing on the household level. Also, our listening to Kyrgyz Republic provides analytical support to our World Bank operations, so such as analysis of the reforms, energy reform in Kyrgyz Republic and impacts of conflict on labor migration from Central Asia, gender assessment, and other analytical reports. We also have we are doing some experiments, and one of them is a policy research working paper, preferences for wage discrimination against women. So this experiment was embedded in the Listening to Central Asia series in the Kyrgyz Republic, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. So this study was very interesting. So this study demonstrates a systematic bias against women in public perception of fairness of wages. We have provided the same CV for respondents. It was same background, same working experience, same education, but what changed is the name on the top. It was either women or men. And surprisingly, respondents were 13% more likely to say 13% more likely to say wages were too high when the randomly assigned person described in the subject was a woman. And 33% more likely to say they were too low when the subject was a man. So basically, when the same competition, people tend to think that women are overpaid and men are underpaid. So these findings reinforce the importance of bias as contributing factor to gender pay gap in our three countries, in Kyrgyz Republic, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. So now I'm going to give you outlook of what people think and their views. So as we see, there are some rising optimism and improving trends in a bunch of questions. So orange is data for 2023 and blue is data for 2022. So as you see, when we are asking people how the government is doing in fighting corruption, so comparing with 2022, we see a rise. So today, like September round, 81% of respondents thinks that government is doing good fighting corruption. When we ask people, so countries generally on the right track or not, we also can see that 81% of respondents think that the country is generally on the right track. So they are also very optimistic about economic situation, like in the future. And 68% of respondents think that the government is providing open dialogue with its citizens. And on financial situation, so we see that that people agree that families' financial situation is worse now than last year, so it's dropped, so it's good for the households. But with this, paired with this, we see some concerns. As my colleague Gohar said, we see a concern traditionally in education sector. And it's this almost the same as last year. So around 70% of respondents are very concerned to give that our education is not high enough for our children. And around 65% today think worried about losing or not finding job. Speaking about prices, even though concerns dropped compared to 2022, so people get used to inflation, I don't know, but still 84% of people concerned that prices are growing very fast. And when we asking respondents and households, do you think that your household is poor? So it's in September, 20% of households respondents said that they consider themselves poor. So this number, 20%, lies like in the middle when we see compare with national poverty line, which is 33% for last year, and our international poverty line is around 15%. So this number is lying in the middle. And when we are asking about the local economic conditions, so we see some optimism there. So 83% of people think that our local economic condition where they live is good, and it's like good time to start business where I live. 61% respondents saying that. And when we are asking, can you pay an emergency expense of 850 soms, like for like medicine or something very urgent, we see the rising dynamics, and it's like similar for urban and rural areas. So now around 75% of respondents can pay emergency expenses. So when we are asking people about politics, how government is doing, so we see some concerns over there. So when we ask whether politicians mostly focus on interest group or public interest, we see that the trend has changed in June, and now like 41% thinks that politicians mostly focus on interest group rather than public interest, general public interest. And like traditionally, I think it's like in almost all countries, people think that politicians are concerned more on next elections than long-term well-being. But surprisingly, the government people think that the government using the revenue from tax in effective way. So it's around 55% think that government uses taxes very good. I think it's also concerned with recent salary increase, a pension increase. So as you know, winter is coming, and what to expect, because traditionally winter become stress for the household across the country. Also, share of dissatisfied with electricity service stabilized in 2023, but we see the huge rise in September, and like when more than 75% of respondents said that electricity service quality, including outages, is a serious problem for my household. And this is relevant for urban and rural areas. So we see some rising trends starting in September. While over half of the respondents believe that tariffs are currently too high, there is a growing portion that suggests tariffs should be raised to enhance service quality. I think it's very relevant to our energy tariff reforms that our government is trying to do today. So basically, half of the population ready to pay more in order to get better electricity quality. And when we are asking our respondents how they prefer to mitigate this tariff increase, we can see that most of them said that special tariffs for poor household is the best option. Then they think that there should be higher business tariffs for electricity and social assistance on the third place. Now we are going to speak about prices and inflation. So as you know, 83% of people think that prices are growing too fast. And in our recent poverty assessment report, we saw that a 10% increase of the food prices increases poverty by 8 percentage points. So inflation is really a concerning issue in this country. Yes, when we're asking people the way prices will be changing next year, so 33% of respondents think that it will increasing faster than now, and like around 30% think that it will increase in the same way as now. So basically, 60% of people think that next year we also will see double-digit inflation. And speaking about specific food items for inflation expectation, we see that during 2022, people were mostly concerned with prices on flour and bread. Just recently, we see a spike in price for rice. And today, when the bread and flour concerns were down, but today we see it's going up. And just yesterday or recently, the government announced fixing price for flour and bread. And we see that 56% are concerned with the price for bread. As we are working closely with the National Bank, we're asking our respondents the trust in the National Bank. So please rate the trust. And we see that the trust is on the highest level starting from our observation in December 2021. And the reason, there's some correlation between what people think about foreign exchange rate and trust to the National Bank. We see that today around 50% of people think that foreign exchange rate, like Kyrgyzstan to US dollars, to US dollar, will not change in the near future. And this correlates with trust to National Bank. So partially, the trust to National Bank depends on what people think about the future FX rate. Speaking about food security, here we see despite inflation, incomes have remained resilient and have contributed to increase in food security over the period of our survey. Nevertheless, we see some worrying trends starting 3 months ago. So now we are asking people a bunch of questions about if concerning their food security. So have you experienced because of lack of money, have you experienced that you worry about the food, that you enable provide yourself healthy food, that you're eating too few because of the money, or you even skip the food? So we see in all of these positions are growing trends that we will follow very closely. And the last, the financial confidence is rising as more respondents think that it's good time to buy on a credit apartment or a car. So today we see it's like 50% are now confident that it's good time to buy like a big purchase on a credit. That's all. Thank you very much. I will give you the floor to our next colleague, New. He will speak about e-commerce. And after that, we will collect all your questions and respond to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aibek. Thank you, all the audience. How are you? And I hope you are not very tired by far. Actually, I'm gonna surprise my colleague Aibek, and that I won't focus my presentation on e-commerce today. But let me say a few words very quickly, because this has been my past month traveling in 3 countries in Central Asia in order to implement this e-commerce project. In a nutshell, this is about helping Kyrgyz Republic to find global consumers. Because we're a landlocked country, we have hardship in reaching to the markets. So in one activity that we help the government, help the business to negotiate with the big markets that are online. And another activity that we try to bring as much as companies in the country, in Kyrgyz Republic, to use this e-commerce tool to find more global consumers. And then we also do promotional events to advertise the country, to advertise our local business. And then we also provide technical support to the government in drafting regulations that enables e-commerce. But that's not the topic, the main topic of my presentation today, because my colleague gave me a task, which is to be interesting. And as you know, like as an economist is sometimes, thank you, pretty hard to be interesting. So that I figure that I'll try to bring you some surprising moments in my own intellectual journey on development economics, and to see how that works with you. How do you think about these sometimes conflicting ideas? So in the background, this is my favorite sculpture. It's called Above the Cloud. And you can see this is one guy fighting himself. And this is the spirit, as I see it, the essence of growth is about being better than yourself. Keep challenging yourself, keep challenging authority, but ultimately it's really about a competition with yourself, not with others. So challenging what you have been believing so that you can learn something new. Okay, so I'm probably the only one that don't speak Russian, but I urged my colleague to translate the slides into Russian. But the downside of that is that maybe some of the translation is might not mean what I meant. So if you see some something that's not clear, please point it out so that to give me a chance to explain. Otherwise, I want to avoid you feeling I'm being offensive. So don't be fooled. Number one, development economics is about developing countries. So I started to learn about economics in a University of Minnesota in the US. And then the courses I took on development economics, it all is all about developing countries, which makes sense. That's the definition of development economics. And then I keep studying what's the issue in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and so on. But then I find something is wrong. So I'll give you 5 seconds so that this picture will help you sink into your brain. So does anyone recognize what is this historical event? Japan, yes, very good, very nice, very impressive. So by the style of the picture, this is drawn by a Japanese artist. And the other key elements is that you see the flag of US, UK, you see France, you see Netherlands, and this is about 1853, the Black Ship event. So this is an American ship that was sailed to Tokyo Bay, and then to negotiate with the Japanese government to open up their markets and to trade with these countries. So the key elements here on this picture are these ones. Do you see what they are? Cannons. Those are cannons. So historically, it was Japan's markets was sort of kicked open by the countries to start these trades. So at that time, these countries are rich and Japan was poor. So then, 15 years after that, this is, you also recognize, this is the Meiji Restoration, that this is a group of elites in Japan. They win the government and they say that we cannot stay like this. We need to see like what's really happening in the world. So they started a study tour for 2 years. They started from 1868, and these leaders, they first go to US. You see San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, New York, and then they keep going to London, to Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Berlin, everywhere. They travel everywhere in the Europe. They go to Rome, and then they through the north of Africa, they go back to Japan. So on their way back, so please do help me not translate it into something that's offensive, but this is what they recorded, that these rich guys, they got rich not very long ago. These Japanese leaders, on their way back, this is what they thought. These rich guys, they didn't get rich very long ago, so we can catch up. We can catch up quickly. And especially when they starting to see the Southeast Asia on their way back, they think, give me some time and I will be the top of Asia. And that's what they did. That's what they did. So that the black ship events, it happens around here. At the time, like the blue is US, orange is Japan, and the gray is the rest of Asia. And you see that there was not much difference in the 1700. And then 1800, and there's already the first industrial revolution in UK, and many UK business in these countries, they moved to America and give it a boost. And by 1870, there's already the second industrial revolution. It's really picking up US. And then here you already see that after this study tour, the Japanese are catching up pretty quickly. It's already leading the rest of Asia. And if you see the trend, it's definitely keep going that way. I'll come back to this huge gap over here, because this in GDP term, it might be misleading. So that many of you probably got my points already, that so don't be fooled. Number one, development economics is about developing countries. No, it is also about the developed countries and how they got rich. And in fact, all of them have been poor and got developed not very long ago, so that we have the aspiration to catch up. And even more important, the most aspirational lessons are hidden in the histories of the rich countries today. So it's more meaningful to study what they have done in the past, in that transitional period from the poor to rich, than like comparing directly of us with them today. So that's the first one. The second one, don't be fooled. Number two, if you can buy it, don't make it. so that international trade is always good. It's so true, right? And I studied my undergrad and also PhD in the US, and this has always been in the textbook. And everybody will be telling you that this is true. And then I guess many of you will recognize this person, Adam Smith. So this is the father of economics, I would say. And The Wealth of Nation is almost the Bible of all economists. And I do really enjoy reading this book and studying Adam Smith's theory. For example, this one. It is a maxim of every prudent master of a family. Never attempt to make at home what will cost him more to make than to buy. The tailor does not attempt to make his own shoes, but buys them of the shoemaker. The shoemaker does not attempt to make his own clothes, but employs a tailor. That is so true. And this idea was stemmed from this key finding of Adam Smith, which is division of labor is the source of productivity. And this is also a very powerful finding of his, because people who really believe in this idea implemented and gave birth to the largest automobile company in the world. So Ford Motor, these pictures are Ford Motor companies back in the 1900s, and they invented this product line. So everybody on this line only focus on a very specific thing to do. And if you keep doing a simple thing repeatedly, you get very good at it. You get very fast, so that the whole productivity like increased geometrically. So this is the beauty of division of labor. You see that this applies to a household, this applies to a firm, a factory, but does it apply to a country as well? In Wealth of Nation, so Adam Smith said that's the case. Like the countries would also try to do this division of labor so that the global productivity will also increase. Let's take a step back. So imagine that country A does not have any technology. That's an extreme case, and thus can only export natural resources or anything that's with low value added products, and then trade with a country that has very high technology. So in a nutshell, technology is simply the product of intellectual capacity. There's a lot of thinking going into technology. You can simplify it in that way. So the result of this trade is that country A is using non-renewable resources or slowly renewable natural resources to trade with a country that's like heavily using the technology. Technology is against the brain power. The brain power renews every single day if you have a good sleep. So that the essence of this trade is that you're using your non-renewable to trade someone's renewable. And like I'm from China, and in China, I heard this tragic story that a young college student, he wanted the iPhone, the newest iPhone, too much. So he went to the hospital and sort of sold his kidney, one of his kidney, because he learned that like people can survive with only one kidney. So he sold one of that and get this iPhone. Imagine how furious the parents would be. You're using your non-renewables to trade with something that updates every single year. So that's the type of trade we're talking about. And I'm not the guy who found this out. This person is Friedrich List, is also my favorite economist, German economist, and someone considered him as the father of modern Germany, that united Germany, the small countries together into the union. And he pointed out this idea that the free trade between countries is advantageous only for agricultural and low value added products. And the power of producing wealth is therefore infinitely more important than the wealth itself. So this power of producing wealth is the intellectual capacity of the country. So let's go back to the Japanese case. So they have been doing Meiji restoration starting from here. And they have been catching up, learning all the how to do things in these 100 years. And here is the World War II. Like they lost a lot and they lost the war, but suddenly they catch up. How you see how quickly that they catch up? Because people's knowledge is still there. It's only about pairing those knowledge, which is the most valuable, with the inputs, and you can start restart your company. You can restart your country's economy very quickly. So that gives let me just okay. This should be the slides. So don't be fool number 2. If you can buy it, don't make it, so that international trade is always good. Not necessarily. It is good only when imports and exports, they carry similar amounts of human intelligence. And don't trade your non-renewables with others' renewables. And honestly, it's still pretty rare to find these words in today's economic class. I think for very similar reason, for very similar logic. So, okay, I'll stop there and leave the rest to the discussion. And then just adding Germany into the picture, they were doing good because it was the Eastern, sorry, I forgot the English word for that, but Germany was doing good previously, and US catch up a little bit better than Japan. And then you see probably around here, this is where List started to bring this idea and to start the industrialization of Germany. And you see them today as one of the most developed countries. Oh, and the third, you probably have heard both of these arguments. First is you need good institutions to have a good economy. You have been hearing that many, many times. And the other one is, like, if you want to have a good institution, you need to be able to afford it. That requires a good economy. Otherwise, how can you pay high salaries to the government officials? The talented people, they don't want to work in the government if they pay a low salary. So what do you want us to do, right? This is the chicken versus egg problem. So today, US is considered as the beacon of democracy and also capitalism. And the standard story is that upon the creation of the US, the good institutional memories of UK planted the seeds onto the American soil. So that's the origin of economic success today. However, is that how the development really happened in the US? Another way to ask it is, did democracy prevented corruption, or did America really begin with a complete package of good institutions? So let's see. This is US in 1789, and you see this US today is not US back then, and is only on the right hand side of the soil, and the left hand side is mostly Spain, and they started on the northeast side of US today. And the name of the painting on the left is called the Highway of Virginia back in the day. So there were a lot of undeveloped land and very bad roads. And they really want to start the economy. So they want to start the economy by building more roads. So the idea is that they start from this realistic problem, lots of undeveloped lands. So the state government is eager to build the cross-state roads. However, they couldn't raise tax at a time because people can simply leave. They go to another state. Another concern is that if you build a cross-state road by state A, state B will free ride. So none of them have the incentive to build it. And then where to find the money? And at a time, they had this invention called taxless finance, which is to provide land charters to private companies. Basically, that's giving the right to use the land to create monopolies so that the private company can also provide part of the finance to the government. And then you can imagine, corruption just came because of this. Like there were stories about governors, they only charter their own network and also take a part of the share of this monopoly profits. And if you Google the Gilded Age, then you will find more about this period. So that you see the complete picture over here is that in 1790, they started with weak institutions because there were no institution for rules, for public finance. And then they had this problem of building more roads. And then they started they couldn't raise tax, so they need to find money, and they create this very innovative idea of taxless finance. And then there was some corruption, increased the public debt. However, the economy really boomed for quite some time. So there were many public projects going on, people have jobs, and the economy was really good for some time. And there were, at that time, it's about 600 chartered banks in the US. And after that, like when more and more people start to do this, there's a deluge of unpromising projects and debts. And to one point, government cannot pay the debt. So then it leads to the first Great Depression in 1840s. And then they had to, they were forced to improve institution. And the result of that is that they create this laws on public finance, laws on anti-monopoly, laws on uniform tax codes. And the result of that is that you have a strong institution. So if we simplify that, they actually started with weak institution, and by improvising, they have the boom, economic boom, which everybody enjoyed. And when there's a bust, the business require better institution, and the result in strong institutions afterwards. So Don't be fooled, number three. Neither of those were completely true. So markets and institutions, they co-evolve. And weak institutions are actually good at building markets. And strong institutions can preserve the markets. So one more explanation on the weak institutions are good at building markets because there were less strings attached to the government officials at that time. So people are allowed to improvise for creative ideas when there's no obvious solutions. But when things goes bad, when the money really comes, you need to better manage this economy, and that requires a stronger institution. So it doesn't go one direction, it co-evolves these institutions and markets. Yes. And for science to be science, it needs to be falsifiable. In other words, it can be proved wrong so that we can always learn and keep challenging ourselves, challenging our existing beliefs so that we can improve our understanding. Just a quick summary. So we see that the rich countries had been poor, and their history of transition provides more lessons than their present. Second, free trade is not always good unless you are trading goods with comparable intellectual inputs, or use the gains to invest in education and skills. Number three, rich countries do not start with perfect institution, so that the weak institution can also kickstart a good economic growth, which will force the institutions to grow as well. And final quote, this is also by List, is that it is a very common, clever device that when anyone has attained the summit of greatness, he kicks away the ladder by which he has climbed up in order to deprive others of the means of climbing up after him. So I will stop here, but in case anyone is interested in e-commerce, I have more to say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, New. I think I did a strategic move to present before him because after him, you wouldn't listen me. So thank you, Neil. And you also fooled us. I thought we will listen about e-commerce, but you gave us overview about economic development. So I think we have some time for questions. So yes, sure. Colleagues, can I ask you to go to the stage and yes, please introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kaset. I work at Central Asia Barometer. It's a polling research center. We conduct research across Central Asia, and I'm particularly interested in your presentation, Aibek. So I have three questions. But first of all, listening to this citizen survey series that you have across Central Asia, I think it's great. And thanks for the World Bank for doing it. And but I was wondering if the raw data available, because I was looking at the website, and it would be great to have all this monthly data available for researchers, for think tanks like us. And also, can you tell about the methodology a little bit if you know? Because I was wondering, I know that in the baseline you recruited like 2,000 people in each country, and then how many people do you survey each month? And also, what method do you use for recruitment of people? I know that you said about representative surveys, but yes, I hope you hear. Okay, that will be it for us. Thanks. Yeah, my last question was about recruitment method. You told about representativeness, and I'm pretty sure that you use some kind of probability-based sampling. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Kasiet, for your questions. We are now working on a single website that will combine data from three Central Asian countries, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And yes, we will definitely share the data with you, with the researchers, with academia. So you can get your own research based on our data and even compare with other Central Asia countries. Because before we had a website for Uzbekistan and Tajikistan data, but now we wanted to get more data on Kyrgyzstan because it's our second year and to have some seasonality factors to look at. So we want to collect like 3 more months. And then we definitely plan to share the data on separate website called Listening to Central Asia Survey Series. Thank you. And regarding the baseline, so here's information how we gathered the data when we started. So initially we had 4,000 households as a baseline in November 2021. And then from then we got 1,500 households, and we are surveying them. And it's representative of major city, urban and rural areas, and on country level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Can you please pass the mic? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentations. Very interesting. Just a couple of questions about the micro foundations of some of the aggregate findings presented. So on poverty and vulnerability, which is very interesting time series data there. Do we have evidence from the micro level of what the triggers, what the individual level triggers are into and perhaps, as more importantly, out of poverty? Because, in the slides I saw things like food price elasticity and so on, and I get that. But I just wonder what the real drivers are in and out of poverty, and also how much churning there is in poverty, how much movement in and out of poverty is there within Kyrgyzstan. And then the other question I had related to the fascinating findings about the gender discrimination preferences. And a similar question on that, I wonder whether in these data that you have, whether you're able to actually find the source of those preferences, the individual level source of the discriminatory preferences. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. Regarding the first question, when we ask households whether they feel themselves poor or not, and then we compare, because we are asking the same households for 2 years in a row, and we see that this answer for household poor is very correlates with his answer on food security. So when people says that his household is poor, he tends to say that he, for example, ate few in that month and had some even skipped the food, and this leads to his answer that his household is poor. So these two questions are very correlated. And speaking about your second question about wage discrimination, I will definitely share with all participants this paper. And I think the methodology and how we did our research is described there. So given the limited time, I think it's better to have a separate discussion on that. Thank you.
Okay, let me just follow up on the first question then.
Yeah.
So do you find the same thing in reverse? So when you find people have moved out of poverty, does that also correlate with the food security question?
Maybe from the macro point of view, I can address your question. When we analyze the poverty reduction trend over the last 2 decades, we see that 3 major factors have contributed to poverty reduction. This is economic growth, which led to income growth for population, and they were able to move out from poverty. The second one is the structural transformation, when people just moved from one sector to another sector, from agriculture, as I have shown, to mostly services and construction. Agriculture is the lowest paid sector, the least productive sector, and when moving to work for another sector, they just got better job opportunities and income earning opportunities. The third factor was remittances. Interestingly, at the beginning of century, Kyrgyzstan received almost zero remittance. But over the 2 decades, it grew up to be one of the highest recipient receiving countries in the world globally, 33% of GDP. This is huge support to, and it mostly goes to private consumption. Very significant support to consumption and to poverty reduction. Thank you.
Any other question? If yeah, please.
Thank you very much, Juligo ADB. We're seeing remittances in the macro data coming down, and I think I remember seeing a great map based on your data that was based on qualitative data, asking basically people how much remittances do you get? And I'm wondering if you or someone else has been tracking the correlation between this qualitative data and the macro data. Because to be frank, we're not quite sure the macro data is reflecting what is actually happening. It would actually be good news if the qualitative data would give another picture. And if in fact remittances are not going down as much as we're concerned they are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is really a good question because the official statistics doesn't allow us to see, especially for the last 2 years, since last year, what is the transfer made by, for example, Russian relocant and what is the transfer made by Kyrgyz migrant. In that sense, the balance of payment statistics, I would say, starting from the last year, especially, yes, is lagging to provide that clarity. Maybe combining the administrative official statistics with survey-based statistics, and then trying to understand, trying to interpret different these trends would be a better option. But if we continue relying on the balance of payment statistics that the National Bank is publishing and looking at the trend of private transfers, we see that the value of transfers in USD terms is declining. This might be a result of both, yes, the ruble depreciation vis-a-vis SOM, and also the decline in remittances in real terms, maybe because of some returning migrants. This trend, the recent trend, needs more analysis and observation to then better understand what's going on the ground.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation. I have a question about this data collection with the social surveys data collection. Normally, it happens like when you go to a village, especially remote village area, with the questionnaire survey, this raises expectation from the community expectation. Like they think like you ask the question whether they are poor or rich. No one saying rich because they are thinking they will get something for us. Like we did survey some area about the livestock, about the grazing. We visited a survey in remote area in Pakistan. They said, we have, how many animals do you have? They said, how much goats you have? They said, 30, 40 goats. Okay, 1 month later, we sent another team to ask, we are doing free vaccination, how much goats you have? Just 400 goats. So these type of things happen, like you ask a question over there, but there was some indicators for checking a validity of data you use the statistic something? So like I'm rich, poor, I'm rich. This how can you validate this data? That was my question.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting question. I mean, for sure, when you are calling household and asking whether you are poor or not, like, can you consider yourself you're poor or not? I think when people first hear such questions, they are always reluctant to answer, like, oh, my household is poor, for example. But we are doing this 2 years in a row, and I think now they had some confidence in our survey, and they can say that they feel that their household is poor. And as I show that today is around 20% of our respondents thinks that their household is poor. And this can be compared to like a national poverty rate that says 33% of household is considered poor on the national level. And if you take our international poverty rate, it says like around 15% of households is considered poor. So our numbers lying in the middle of these two poverty rates, international and national poverty rates. And I think it's quite correlates what government is estimating and what we as a World Bank estimating. So I think it's quite a confident number, and for sure, different reason may impact the answer for this question, but hopefully we get zero on that question in near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just yeah, follow-up question again on the listening to Kyrgyzstan survey data. So do you see any north-south divide with your data? What's the geographical coverage? So yeah, we know that on a lot of data, remittances, poverty, economic opportunities, the divergence is quite important. So do you see that in your survey? Also, yeah, another question, but that was Gohar's answer. Are you looking at macro and macro level and micro survey level data correlation with listening to Kyrgyzstan now that you have this long data series? I think, yeah, do you see any similar trends in survey data and macro data?
Yes, thank you. So regarding your second question, we definitely see correlation between our microdata and what's going on macro level. For example, in remittances, when we did some research on Central Asia migrants, for example, we saw that after mobilization, for example, people who wants to migrate to Russia, they dropped dramatically. And official statistic also says that remittances fall during that time. So we can see from different questions that it's really correlates with macro levels.
Yes, I think just echoing what our colleague said in the past, previously, that survey, we should be cautious in interpreting and treating survey-based data because naturally it might not be reflecting the true picture. Therefore, and also in statistics, we know that there is no full coverage, and usually it is based on a sample, yes, a sample of companies or respondents who are presenting statistical reports. Therefore, all the time comparing the two, yes, macro or administrative register-based data with survey-based data would be helpful. I mean, each has its own strengths and weaknesses, but a useful source of information. That maybe I will use the opportunity while Mike is with me answering the part of the question on journey of poverty. Yes, the in and out to poverty is into poverty and out of poverty. This journey is high in Kyrgyz. Because the structural transformation about which I was saying from agriculture to services still doesn't give assurance that those who work for services they have secure job, because mostly these subsectors of services is in sectors like retail trade, others, which is mostly informal job, insecure. If some shock happens, then they lose their jobs, and there is no that long-term assurance of having secure job. Therefore, still that journey is high, and as I showed, about 70% of population is still vulnerable. Part like 25% is poor, but the rest is vulnerable to falling into poverty. Thank you.
Yes, please. I think we stole your coffee time, so we are very sorry.
Thank you a lot for your presentations. I have a question to Ms. Gohar.
Gohar.
Yes. With regards to country diagnostics, some of your findings pointed to the high level of regulation, corruption that is imposed by state. So my question to you, are you suggesting a compact state in Kyrgyzstan, or your report suggests that state should be increased to support development in Kyrgyzstan? So what is the role of the state? Should we have a bigger state, a minimum state, or otherwise, how does it fit with the new public management ideology? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. We didn't point to the size of the state as much, though we are seeing it is big. And I also mentioned about the public spending on wage and salary. We are saying the state should be efficient. And measures, how do we measure the efficiency of state? It is measured by this level of public services provided. As you saw, 35%, only 35% of population has access to drinking water at home, and sewage and others. So there are other also measures. For example, when we look at the structure of public spending, we see that, for example, on education, the government, the Kyrgyz society, yes, through the budget, allocates 6-7% of GDP. This is really high level of spending. But to what extent these spendings are translated into educational attainments, good educational outcomes? Here, as we saw, both survey and other test data show that the situation is really worrisome. 70%, 65% of kids, they are lagging basic math skills. So the issue is about ensuring efficiency. If there is input by spending from the budget on some public services, this should be efficient. If the government is introducing regulations, they should be efficient in terms of really striking the balance between, creating a level playing field, equal opportunities for businesses to enter to market, and also making sure that, for example, consumer rights are protected. It should not be regulation just for the sake of regulation, yes, creating barriers to entry to market. We should see how many new jobs are created. Unfortunately, of course, every year there are new jobs created, but when we are looking at the recent trade, jobs are created mostly by in the informal sector, and mostly by small and individual companies. These jobs are not quality jobs. As I said, they are very vulnerable to any shock. But if jobs are created by medium or large size companies, they are open, yes. These companies, in order to get bank loans, they should be transparent, formal, and paying taxes, so on and so forth. And then they will have buffers to also weather shocks.
I think we are out of time because next session will start in 5 minutes. I want to thank our presenters for such a great presentations and you for participating in our session. Thank you.